Okie doke. Hello. Welcome to our April 23rd check-in for the Tufts Capstone project in spring 2025. This is like kind of sort like not exactly our last one, but like getting close. Like I think next week is technically the last check-in. Um, my agenda is kind of light. I wanted to hold some space for if you wanted to talk any more about the mock grooming. Um, I also wanted to check in about next week's presentation to GitLab folks on your end. Otherwise, any other things you all want to talk about, we've got some room for those. Um, so let's just go down the list as I've got it. Anything else on mock grooming? Follow up to last week?
Yeah, well, we created like a short presentation and want you guys to maybe like look over it quickly to see if like our agenda lines up and like any information we should include.
Cool. Yeah. Do you want to try it out now or?
Yeah, we can do that. I can share my screen. It's not like done yet because we're still waiting for our results from this round to finalize our solution, but as of right now, we have like the agenda of kind of giving the background and then the prototype and then showing our like
Mm.
specs and acceptance criteria. Um, we have the problem statement and um, the insights from our first research, like not our testing, but the overview research. And then we have our intended users, um, our solution, and then this will be our like feedback from the testing in general, and then we will have like a full prototype demo. Um, and then these are some of the screenshots of the pin features we have with the some action buttons. Um, yeah, this is all we have right now. Do you think our agenda is okay? Is there anything else we have to add and also any other information you think would be helpful for the grooming?
Um, what's the middle part of it? So you've got the why, and then the spec is like here's the nitty gritty of how to do it. What was the second part in the agenda?
It was just like a background and then showing the prototype and then the
Oh, okay.
spec. Yeah.
Sure. I think that makes sense as a conversation, right? You're saying like here's why we're doing this, and here's like the problem we're going to solve. Here's our
Hmm.
prototype for it, and then that I think naturally leads into you're just getting more and more specific, and they're asking questions about the prototype. Now you're talking about specs and acceptance criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would expect that basically part three ends up being most of the hour.
Hmm.
Like I think background part is like a couple of slides. I think everybody was kind of nodding, go, great, got it. Prototype, there'll be some discussion, but then I would expect you'll probably end up spending a lot of your time on like, okay, but how do we do this specific thing? They may have questions and feedback, that kind of thing. So I think that
Hmm.
makes sense as an agenda. Also, great slides.
Thank you.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
looks good. I had one comment just about the research because um, you could condense it a bit if you wanted to and just link out to, because I know you did multiple rounds of research. So maybe you could just pull out like the most important insights that relate to your final prototype and then
Hmm.
link out to like the previous research done. Just because I'm thinking like for the final presentation, the in-depth research results would be really useful, but I'm thinking for a grooming session, maybe having less focus on all the rounds would be good. What do you think,
Hmm.
Chad?
Yeah, I think that is good feedback because essentially coming into this conversation for grooming, um, your research should really just be, here's the final finding sort of thing. It's like it's kind of just a supporting argument to the background, right? It's like so the background is the why, and the research is the like the support to the why and a support to the how. You know, I think that like on your problem slide, basically you could probably kind of weave the research results into these other slides. Like on the problem slide, you could mention a little bit about, you know, participants said overall that blah blah blah, like kind of show that like there's research behind the validation of this problem. On the like our solution slide, you could say, you know, we found through user testing that blah 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 about
Mhm.
this. You know, you're basically, you don't really have to present the research to the developers in this. You know, in like a real process, the product manager has been there for the user research along the way. They're familiar with all of this already. They've already said, yeah, this is the right way to move forward on this. Let's bring it to the engineers and get their feedback from a technical perspective and talk about how we break this down. That's like kind of the point that you're coming into this meeting. So I don't think that they're going to necessarily be looking for research results from you. They're going to be looking for like, what have you decided to build? How does it work? How should it work?
Mhm.
Let's talk about how we make that happen in the browser. So I think it is good to like mention a little bit in kind of some of these slides, like just to make it clear that like you're not just like pulling it out of a hat, you know? Uh, but I don't think they're going to be like, well, where's the slide about your research? Did you even do your research? That's not going to be where the conversation is. It may be helpful though if they have questions about, oh, like, you know, is like, let's say there's a part of the functionality that they're like, that would actually be very complicated to implement. Is that something you think we could skip? That's where your own knowledge of the research you've done may be helpful, because you could say, oh, like that's actually a really essential part of solving the problem. Like, can we figure out a different way of doing it? Or you could say, yeah, like I think if we didn't have that, we would still be solving our like achieving our overall goal, you know, we saw in the research, blah, blah, blah. So I think being familiar with your own research results is good in the conversation, but it's not that important to like present them.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So we'll make those iterations before Friday and then maybe like list out like a couple questions we have for um the engineers about our project.
Yeah, you might want to like setup wise. I, I would say you'll probably want to share these slides and then maybe have a final slide with like, you know, some questions to start the conversation, and then be prepared to like have your prototype open and share your screen and like look at the Figma file, look at the prototype with them kind of thing. Um, yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
cool. Let's talk a little bit about the presentation internally to a GitLab audience. What are your thoughts on that? Obviously, you know, the project won't be done until it's like almost time. So, um, but what are your thoughts, feelings, questions on all of that? Anything we can help or advise with?
Um, well, most of our like deliverables are due on Friday, so like the day after the final presentation. So we're planning to get like a lot of things done early on in the week so that we have time for like the presentation and like to practice over. Um, I think we have most of the information right now. We're just missing kind of like the last round of testing results and um the actual solution. So we can definitely like start and like by next Wednesday, I think we can show you guys like a draft of our presentation um to be prepared for Thursday.
Cool.
The screenshots I saw of the pin feature, by the way, in your slides look really good. I don't think I had seen since the last time we talked, I don't think I had seen like the new iterations of them. I just wanted to say it looked good.
You yeah, I was just fixing it like beginning of this week to be ready for our testing. So I have the new iterations of the design ready, but I was also wondering like if I should like make a walk through again and then send it for feedback, or I don't think we have enough time, but just wondering if also I haven't gotten feedback from the design manager who was in charge of the pin feature. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the nice thing about making a walkthrough video is that it's going to be fairly quick. Like if you want to make, a couple minute long, however long, it won't take you very long. Like the video itself won't end up being very long. If you want to make that and share it on that issue, and then you could maybe even like ping the relevant designers in a comment like, hey, here's like an updated version of our design. I'm just wondering if you have any more feedback. We're going to kind of wrap this up next week. Just to kind of like give them a sense of like, mild urgency. Like, hey, if you've got any feedback, this is kind of the window's closing on it. Here's the latest version. And then I think it really gives it to them on a platter, right? It's like, here's a 5-minute video, watch it and tell me what you think kind of thing.
That's good.
Gina, you had something that you added on the agenda.
Yeah, I kind of just started thinking about this. One thing I've seen, so we do a couple at Tufts, sorry, at GitLab, we do a couple of different partnerships with schools. So we do another one in the engineering department, actually, with Morehouse College is what it's called. And one thing I've seen them do is have the students record videos of providing like more in-depth feedback of how you feel like this went, what you learned, other questions that like Chad and I would need to think about together, I think. But I'm curious if like have other student groups recorded videos for the companies that they're teamed up with, do you know? And like would that be something that you'd be comfortable doing?
Yeah, in terms of video, we do have an assignment to kind of record like the overall like process. So like what the problem is, how we solved the problem, like what the user said, and like kind of demonstrating the solution. So like an overview video, short video of like the whole project. But I don't think we've had one that's like giving feedback or anything like that, but we can definitely do that too.
And we could also connect with Linda just to like make sure that that would make sense in her eyes. I think it would be useful for us because we've been running this for three years now, and just to get an understanding of like what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, what we can do better. If you're learning the things that you wanted to learn, just so that we can make this better in future years.
Yeah, we can definitely.
How do you think that should, I don't know, interact or combine with or whatever the like live in-person retro that we were thinking of doing in the first week of May? So I think that there's
Yeah.
benefit in both of them. I think that if we want to ask you all to like record your own kind of like, the confessional booth or on the reality TV show kind of thing, I think it makes sense to do that before we have a conversation together, because then you've kind of all like thought a bit about it and kind of gotten your own perspective on what's going on, and then you maybe have a more interesting or informed conversation about your shared feedback as a group. That would, however, mean that we would need you to record this like in the middle of doing all your other stuff and like finals and stuff. So there's a balance there.
I forgot we had the retro scheduled, I'm not gonna lie.
Well, I mean, no, I think that these are kind of different things, right? This is like an in-depth, just my perspective. Here's my brain dump about how all this went. And then like the retro, I feel like synchronous in-person retros are like really different than async ones, right? Because people are going to kind of
Yeah.
like pop ideas off each other and remind each other about things.
Yeah, what do you this as in the students, how do you feel about like do you feel like adding uh recording of yourself would just be more work, like while you're trying to finish everything up at the end of the school year?
I think for me, like I'm thinking, because even going into the retro, like I'd probably have to do some reflecting, or it would be nice to do some reflecting. I think on my own, I'm like video. I'm just thinking in terms of like the prep of it. I'm like I know when I record, I tend to record myself like a bunch of times. So, but like maybe notes. I don't know if that's any better,
Mhm.
but also I don't know how do people feel about the video too.
I would prefer the video over taking notes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think I could adjust to a video, but that was just like my
Well,
initial
I
thing. But
mean,
yeah.
what if like I don't think that the video per se is like a required output of this. This could be a
Right.
multimodal thing. If it's easier for you to just like talk at your phone, no problem. If it's easier for you to like make a voice memo, but I think that's fine too. And like written is also fine. I think to I think Gina mentioned that we would, yeah, want to put together some questions for you to guide this, so it's not just like, a big blank slate and it's like, please give me something. Like, I think we would want to kind of give you like a framework to respond to make it so that you don't just have to kind of invent the whole thing. But yeah, if it's feasible for you all to do that before the retro in person over the internet that we do, I think that would probably be helpful.
Yeah, we can.
And then I think also we would probably just like, to make you feel comfortable giving whatever kind of feedback you have, I think we would probably want to say that like whatever method you give us, that feedback from our questions, maybe that'll just be like among us, or maybe among us and Linda, like, it won't be something we'll like put on the YouTube channel, that kind of thing.
Right.
That sounds feasible. Yeah.
Cool. Let's get
Okay.
back to Gina.
Cool. Okay. Great.
Those are the only things that we have on the agenda. Anything else you want to check in about, ask about, get some feedback on while we're here together?
I mean, I had some questions that were just like coming up for me so we've had two of the kind of like round two interviews so far. And I don't know, I feel like so basically my question is like how do you handle like new things that come up in interviews? Just in the sense like I feel like we've touched on it in the sense of like, oh, we're getting all these, different call it variation ideas. Um, but so I know it's like not necessarily I know the goal isn't like to completely deviate from our initial product, but like, do you guys like usually just like in your day to day, I guess, keep track of all these like alternate kind of options to kind of like keep in back in mind? Like, yeah, basically, how do you handle things when like it's like, oh wait, that would be interesting to follow up on, even though we can't right now, but yeah, just like that general idea.
Yeah. I think definitely always, write them down, put them in the notes of the interview. And I think that there's kind of two separate things. So, like in the interview, in that, interpersonal interaction, like it's a gift that they're giving you. It's definitely important
Mm.
to like be thankful for it, be like, oh, that's a really interesting idea. That's actually not one we've thought of. Like, we'll write that down. It's probably also good to be transparent about like where you are in the process of the project. In the real world, you're usually looking to build a real thing that's really going to go in the product of this person. Hopefully we'll see, right? So, at this point in the project, I think you'd probably want to say something like, we've only got like another week left, but I'm going to put this in our like write-up because this could be really interesting further exploration for like other people, along these lines, kind of thing. Um,
Mhm.
Generally, when I'm doing like analysis of like research interviews, I have like a bucket in my, FigJam or whatever that's like really interesting other ideas that people brought up.
Mm.
And I think it's like a classic problem in design departments, UX departments, whatever, where it's like, what happens with those? It's very easy for those to just never go anywhere. I've seen people have like a backlog queue of like, interesting ideas that need more research kind of thing. Those can also kind of go fallow. Um, I think that in the very particular case of this project, there's probably like, like possibly even multiple pages long bullet point list that you could put in like your final write-up. It's like, here's a bunch of interesting other ideas that if we had more time, we would have loved to explore about this. Those can probably all go in there for now. Yeah, I think what you do with interesting feedback that like you can't take action on right away in your design slash is kind of like tangential to the design, but still seems like maybe the users or participants not wrong either. It can be hard to figure out what to do with those to make sure they don't get like lost in the cracks.
Yeah, to add to that, I think there's like so the specific area that I work on the product is it's called GitLab Runner, and people have very, very distinct ideas
Mhm.
about how they want that to work. So there's often new feature requests coming in like all the time. Um, what I typically do, I follow the same type of thing that Chad does, which is like recognize that it's a good idea, tell them that during the meeting, write it down, but I don't typically create like a research issue to look further into it unless I hear that from at least like two other participants. So if it's a one-off idea that I'm not hearing as a trend, I typically do not even like do anything with that. Um, if I hear it from two or three participants, I'll create an issue and mark it as something that should be validated. So I would do like another research project to understand if that's even a problem across a broader set of users. And then that would give me the indication to move forward with it, or at least like try to partner with my PM and see where it lies in the priorities that we have set. And maybe there's no business value in it also. So that's another reason why I would partner with my PM on it.
Mm. No, yeah, that makes sense because I think one of the particular things that had come up yesterday was um the interview had been like was very confused by just like the name pinning and was very like pushy on like, oh, but this is more of a highlight, this is more of a highlight. And then for me, I mean obviously it was just like in the interview and then like post it, but I was like, oh my God, like should we like be changing the name now? But I think what you said about the trend thing, it's like, well, what are the trends? It's not just the one. And yeah, that's definitely that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, one thing I'm learning more as I see like AI work produced from GitLab too is that we treat because AI is so fast moving right now, fast paced.
Hmm.
Sometimes we treat the feedback we get from a single person differently than like in this case. I'm seeing that it typically I'm like, well, I heard it from one person. That doesn't mean that it affects our whole user base at GitLab. But I am seeing with AI, we're treating that differently. Like we'll move on, potentially explore changing something based on one person's feedback. That's just a note for experience in the future if you do work with AI things. No. Chad, you deal with some AI features, right?
Yeah, I think anything that's like a fast moving competitive feature set, um the rules for what's going to make it into the product or not are going to change. Like if you're working on it's kind of like like a short order cook really has to like get it out there. Like those people sitting at the counter are like expecting their pancakes, whereas like at a fancy restaurant, well, if they make you wait an hour, kind of who cares? I think that when demand is really high for a feature set and there's a lot of kind of baseline user expectation to meet and get things out the door, then the bar for of sensitivity to like potential need for change in the existing feature set, I think is lower. You know, like you can kind of go like, oh, like, because I think it's also, you're also more likely to deliver things that you maybe didn't do full validation on. So then those things you didn't do full validation on, when you get feedback about it, you're maybe more likely to say, oh yeah, maybe we should act on that feedback. So it's also, I think, a good object lesson in why it's important to validate before you ship, because then you're more resilient to one-off feedback. You know, like the volume and intensity of a piece of feedback from a user is not necessarily proportional to the implementability or need for the requested change. So having kind of a good baseline of like, no, we've done the research, we know like what the problem is, whatever, can help you kind of like not be like, you know, pushed over by the wave kind of thing. However, I do think that it's a good instinct as well on your part to, if someone's giving you pushback about the name, to not just assume, well, this person's just whatever. I think it's good to be kind of, as the individual researcher, sensitive to like, oh, I wonder if other people are feeling this way too and haven't said it. You know, if you had more time and whatever, you could go back to other like recorded interviews you've done and see if there's anyone who seems hesitant about that nomenclature or anything, but doesn't necessarily say it. If you really wanted to, you could, you know, like I think this feature is probably not like deal breaking enough that you would need to do this, but I do think that there are things where people do research about nomenclature for sure. You know, we're in the middle of a big change. We're changing issues to a thing called work items, and there's a lot of research that was done about what do we call these things? How do people think about them? Like, you know, kind of like what's the mental model that we're trying to like hook into? So that is a thing you can do, but it's like, you know, for a feature like this, you know, this is also the kind of thing where if you put it out and then you got like, we frequently will open up like a public feedback issue about new features. And maybe you would get like, you know, 30 people in a thread in that issue. They're like, this shouldn't be called pinning. This should be called this other thing. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And it's got a bunch of thumbs up. And it's like, okay, interesting. There's like some validation there that maybe there's something to look into. But again, I don't think it's necessarily something where you'd want to just be like, oh, we'll just change it. You know, you would want to like think more about why. Any other things we want to check in about, chat about?
I don't think so. I think with the first two testing, it's like we're just gonna have to like see what the rest of them say.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I put a couple of action items on here for myself. One was I want to make sure I go remind the UX team about the presentation next week to try to get good attendance there. Um, and I put a thing on here for writing up a bit about the mock grooming for the developer participants. I think I am still going to do that. I'll share it with you as well, for your feedback and also for your information before I do that. Yeah, and then Gina is adding right now that we, the GitLab group, should write up some questions for you all for like an async kind of personal retro.
I guess like one little clarifying one, for when we do the whole group, um, we should include like more of the, should we still include more of the research? How, because I know for the mock, it's like that's the developer specific, but the whole group we should include.
Yeah, you know, I think think of the presentation to the GitLab audience as like a dress rehearsal for your final presentation. So what it like just do whatever you're planning on doing for your final presentation. Take this as an opportunity to rehearse it. But yeah, definitely you're like presenting the project. You're not necessarily like saying like, we're gonna build this, here's what it is kind of thing. You know, like I think they will be more interested in seeing what your process was, what your questions were along the way, challenges you went through, all that sort of thing.
Okay.
Good question.
Oh yeah, and one thing that we're thinking of adding to our like round two testing is the sus scale. That was something Linda suggested. I don't know what your guys' opinions are on collecting more metrics like that for round two.
Is this, can you just give an example of what that would look like, the sus scale?
So we were thinking of having the participants fill out assess like questions after each prototype, and then I can link the questions in the chat. Hold on a sec. I just dropped it in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, they're like a lot more like general questions about usability. So I don't know how useful.
I think a couple of thoughts on this. One, I think that as long as it doesn't make the interview too long, collecting some kind of more structured data from all of the participants in the round is good, right? That can only help you. Two, a question, like pragmatically, how would you do it? Like, would you give them this link and have them fill it out? Or would you just ask them the questions? Would you make your own version of this and have them fill it out? Like, how do you envision asking them the questions?
We're thinking of just giving them the link.
What actually, so,
Yeah.
okay, I'm looking at it now. What happens if I did, like, how do I get the results of this? I guess it doesn't matter, right? You're going to be recording the screen, so you can see what their final results are when they get to it, even if they just fill it out and then close it. Yeah, I guess so. Because I just did it, and then it gives me a little result on the sus score. So you'll see that and it'll be in the recording.
Yeah, I feel like this would be helpful to Chad's point, like having additional data doesn't hurt. I don't think we've used a 10 question whatever survey to assess this. I feel like I've only used like a 3 to 5 question one, but that doesn't mean that you can't. I'm interested to actually see what the results would be for this one compared to the one that we use typically.
Yeah, if you
I
just want
predict
to
based on the
save some time.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Chad.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
No, if you just want to save some interview time, like you can just send out like whatever link do you want to like share with your participants and then just like ask them to fill out after the interview. That's how I like to do when I want to save some time of the actual interview. But always having more data is helpful, but I I have used the full 10 questions sometimes, but like as Gina mentioned, like Tuesdays, maybe 3 to 5 max. Sorry, Ted.
No, it's okay. I would predict that if you send them the link and have them fill it out, you want to have them do it live because when you answer the last question, it tells you the score in a little box on the bottom right. And I just kind of was randomly clicking and I got an F. And I feel like if a participant truly answers them and then on the last one they do it and it's like not a good score, they might feel bad. And if you're asking them to do it like async and take a screenshot, they might like adjust it to like give you a better score. Just because like people are nice and people will kind of like bend the rules a little bit to like be nice to a research coordinator. So if you have them fill it out on a screen share, I would have them do it live. You could also just have one of you do it and just ask them the questions. They don't see anything and they don't see what the final score is. And then just one of you does it, takes a screenshot, and away you go. And then they don't see kind of what the final result of it was. That's a different way you could approach it.
Yeah, what type of scale do you guys usually use internally?
Great question.
Yeah.
I feel like it's all over the place.
Yeah, I do think that we probably have some standardized templates for this kind of thing. I have not used them. I think that the kind of user research that I have done is like a little bit different than like kind of like we're thinking about building this new feature. Here's kind of like the whole flow. What do you think? Like kind of thing.
I'm trying to find an example I can share. Sunjung, have you done any recently that you can think of?
I think it was like in the past, like not the recent one. I don't remember we have a template, but I mostly just modify based on the context. So that means I don't have any template to use.
Oh, you know what? We do have some for category maturity scorecards, I think. I'll look that up.
I am signing into my usertesting.com account right now. To look at because we have some like kind of like canned things.
I just pasted one example, but this one, so this is what we use. When we assess, we have these things called categories, which typically relate to like a set of features. And we ask 3 questions where they're all kind of about different things. That helps us assess what the final score is to assess the maturity of those features in a sense. So you can see those questions and what the scales are there. But I mean, the last one, the UX Lite, is like it's correlated with sus. So it's very similar. I wonder if that's the same link that you sent. Yeah, if you look at the sus scale as well, there's more issues there. I mean, more questions that might relate better to what you sent. I'll send that link.
Yeah, maybe we use the UX Lite.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that could be good. It looks like there's only, I mean, there's a 5-point version if you click on the link there. I don't know.
I think it's the
Not
same.
give,
It's the same questions for UX, but either way, right? It's like blank's capabilities meet my requirements. Using blank is a frustrating experience. Using blank is easy to use. I have spent too much time correcting things with blank.
which are the same as the sus ones you're saying?
No, I think like whether it's the 5-point or the 7-point version, I think it's the same for questions for UX.
Yes, agreed. Yeah. Yeah, that does seem like a lighter weight version than using the sus questions. So you could do that.
I also think it is probably worthwhile to read about these different ones and mention in your like final project write-up that you thought about these different ones and this is the one you chose, you know?
Agreed.
Cool. Well, if we don't have anything else, we can wrap it up. We've got some follow-up items. Oh, right. I'm gonna add there's another action item for you all, which was to share with us a draft of the stuff, like a more up-to-date draft of the stuff for the grooming, right?
Yeah, and we can send you a link to the prototype and the presentation before Friday.
Cool. And then I won't put it on action item here because it's for next week, but we also discussed next week, like before your presentation on Thursday, sharing some stuff with us to give you feedback on as well. Cool. All right. Happy Wednesday. See you next
Thank
time.
you guys. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.